concept assembly line, where ideas get to work. On July 1st, 2025, CVS Caremark, one of the most powerful pharmacy benefit managers in the country, removed Zepbound from its preferred drug formulary. The move effectively ends coverage for the medication as a weight loss treatment for all members whose prescription benefits are administered through CVS Caremark. There was no significant public announcement, no patient vote, no period of adjustment. It simply vanished from coverage. And with that decision, thousands of Americans found themselves abruptly cut off from a therapy many had come to depend on, forced to either pay out of pocket, navigate alternative medications, or enter an opaque and often ineffective appeals process. The impact of such a blackout cannot be overstated. Patients undergoing treatment for chronic conditions that Zepbound addresses, including obesity, insulin resistance, cardiovascular risk factors, and obstructive sleep apnea, are now being pushed toward less effective therapies or left with no suitable alternative. And unlike the media world, where a cable provider blacking out a TV channel may push you to switch to another service, healthcare doesn't work that way. People don't get to choose their pharmacy benefit manager. They're captive to it, conscripted into a pricing war they didn't start and can't escape. Zepbound isn't a luxury item. It's medicine. Zepbound is not a cosmetic enhancement or lifestyle aid. It's a breakthrough in treating obesity and metabolic dysfunction. As part of the new generation of GLP-1 receptor agonists, the drug has demonstrated powerful effects not just on weight reduction, but on downstream comorbidities like diabetes, hypertension, and high cholesterol. In many cases, Zepbound represents the first truly effective intervention after years of failed diets, behavioral therapies, and secondary medications. It is a tool of last resort that actually works. By removing it from coverage, CVS Caremark isn't just nudging people toward generics or less expensive equivalents. It is withdrawing access to a unique class of treatment, forcing patients to either regress to earlier, often ineffective options, or exit the insurance system entirely and pay thousands out of pocket. This isn't formulary fine-tuning. It's a clinical disruption, one with real, measurable health consequences. Most Americans don't know the name of their pharmacy benefit manager. That's by design. PBMs, like CVS Caremark, operate behind the scenes, nestled within employer insurance plans and tasked with managing prescription costs. But their influence is anything but invisible. They hold absolute power over which drugs are covered, which are restricted, and which are blacklisted altogether. They set the tiers that determine whether your medication costs $10 or $1,000 a month, and they do it without your input. What makes this structure uniquely frustrating is the complete absence of consumer agency. You don't pick your PBM, your employer or insurer does. And once assigned, you cannot opt out. There's no alternative network, no way to upgrade, no competitors to switch to. In that sense, PBMs resemble monopolies even within employer-sponsored insurance ecosystems. The Zepbound removal underscores the fundamental fragility of patient autonomy under this system. It's not that patients chose poorly, it's that they were never allowed to choose at all. At the heart of this issue is a structural conflict of interest. Pharmacy benefit managers are paid to manage drug costs, but they often profit most when those costs are high. One major source of revenue for PBMs is the rebate, a financial kickback negotiated from drug manufacturers in exchange for favorable placement on the formulary. These rebates, often shrouded in secrecy, can be enormous. Yet patients rarely benefit directly. Employers may see some cost reduction, but PBMs frequently retain a substantial share of these funds, either directly or through affiliated rebate aggregators. This means that the drugs most favored by PBMs are not necessarily the cheapest or most effective, but the ones offering the biggest financial incentives. In addition to rebates, PBMs engage in what's known as spread pricing. Here, they charge insurers or employer plans one price for a drug and reimburse pharmacies a lower amount, pocketing the difference. This margin becomes yet another source of profit, one that incentivizes keeping certain drugs on the market, not because they're cost-effective, but because the spread is lucrative. In the case of Zepbound, it's entirely plausible that its exclusion is not based on clinical outcomes or net cost, but on a breakdown in rebate negotiations between CVS Caremark and the manufacturer, Eli Lilly. If Lilly refused to sweeten the rebate offer, CVS Caremark responded with a threat: lose access to millions of patients. What looks on the surface like a cost containment strategy is in practice a leverage play. Patients are pawns in a contract dispute that neither they nor their doctors are invited to witness. If this sounds familiar, it's because we've already seen it happen with insulin. Between the mid-1990s and late 2010s, the price of insulin in the United States exploded, increasing more than tenfold. This wasn't due to manufacturing complexity or clinical breakthroughs. It was driven by the same rebate-driven arms race, now consuming the GLP-1 drug class. Insulin manufacturers, desperate to maintain formulary access, offered ever larger rebates to PBMs, who in turn favored newer and more expensive versions of the drug, even when cheaper and equally effective options existed. As public outcry mounted, states began capping insulin prices and demanding transparency from PBMs. Congressional hearings exposed the tangled rebate system, revealing how PBMs acted as price escalators rather than cost suppressors. But the damage was already done. Patients died rationing insulin, went into debt to afford it, or endured unnecessary complications, all in service of a rebate structure that prioritized corporate revenue over public health. The Zepbound story is different in clinical terms, but identical in architecture. The intermediary, not the doctor, not the FDA, not even the insurer, dictates whether a patient can access the treatment that works best for them. For those impacted by CVS Caremark's decision, recourse is limited and often demoralizing. Patients can attempt to file for a coverage exception, typically requiring extensive documentation from a physician to prove that no suitable alternative exists or that the patient has failed other therapies. But even when medically justified, these requests are often denied or delayed indefinitely. The appeals process is a paper gauntlet, and it favors administrative patience over clinical urgency. Some patients have turned to their employers for help, urging HR departments to pressure CVS Caremark or consider alternative PBM contracts. This strategy can be effective, particularly in smaller companies, where employee satisfaction carries more weight. However, it is not a quick fix, nor is it accessible to all workers, especially those in large corporations where benefits decisions are outsourced or rigidly scheduled. A few turn to public campaigns, contacting journalists or elected officials to expose the human cost of coverage denials. In past cases, sustained media attention has forced PBMs to reverse unpopular decisions or preempt looming regulation. Others explore litigation, particularly in cases where PBMs may have violated ERISA statutes or failed to provide medically necessary treatment as defined in the plan. But lawsuits are costly and slow, and in most cases, patients simply don't have the time or resources to wait out a legal process while their health hangs in the balance. What unites these scenarios is how little agency the patient actually holds. The system is built to insulate PBMs from public accountability, leaving the people most affected with the least ability to intervene. The Zepbound blackout is not a one-off incident or corporate miscommunication. It's a case study in how American healthcare has been engineered to prioritize intermediaries over outcomes. PBMs, once created to contain costs, now serve as self-reinforcing profit engines. They extract value through complexity, obscuring the true cost of care behind a veil of spreadsheets, rebate flows, and contractual fine print. No one actor, not the patient, not the doctor, not even the employer, can reliably break through that wall of opacity. Real reform requires more than transparency. It demands a restructuring of incentives. Formularies should be grounded in clinical efficacy and patient outcomes, not rebate volume. PBM profits should not be tied to spread margins or formulary exclusion. And most critically, patients must have some form of appeal or override that is fast, fair, and functional. Until we treat PBMs as the regulatory targets they've become, rather than passive administrators, blackouts like the one Zepbound users now face will become a recurring feature of the American healthcare experience. For those who've lost access to Zepbound, there's no boardroom to protest in, no hotline with a human voice, only a silent line item on a cost model that now says, "Not covered." That spreadsheet, somewhere inside CVS Caremark, is now more powerful than your doctor, more decisive than your medical history, and more final than your appeal. This isn't just a flaw in the system, it is the system. And unless we confront the market architecture that allows PBMs to dominate care decisions without accountability, we'll keep waking up to find our medications gone, our choices narrowed, and our bodies made collateral in a profit negotiation we never authorized. This video is part of a broader project to reimagine public policy for real people, grounded in modern monetary theory, committed to abundance over austerity, and focused on rebuilding the freedom infrastructure of everyday life. If my work resonates with you, share it. Subscribe on YouTube for more multi-format content. Together, we can reclaim what was once built and build it back better.